From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Monday, December 2. Jim Chalmers has raised taxes by $44 billion and added $104 billion in spending to the federal budget. That's the stark analysis from economist Chris Richardson. It's an exclusive live now at theaustralian.com.au. In the cold waters of Tasmania's west coast lives a little endangered fish that's causing a big drama for the local salmon farmers. They fear Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek will seek to kill off salmon farming to save the Maugean skate. And it's playing into a high-stakes tussle between Plibersek and the Prime Minister. Today, the intriguing battle between Anthony Albanese and Tanya Plibersek. They should be the closest of allies, both warriors of the Labor left, representing inner Sydney, where Labor's greatest foe is not the Conservatives, but the Greens. Once Anthony Albanese and Tanya Plibersek gave every appearance of being good friends, but that's over. The first time this registered on the national consciousness was after the 2022 election, when Plibersek missed out on becoming minister for the two portfolios she'd spent years stamping with her name, education and women. Instead, Albanese made her Minister for the Environment and Water.
There was no reason whatsoever other than pure politics to appoint Ms Plibersek, an inner-city Sydney residing MP, as having carriage for the Murray-Darling Basin, to have to handle really tricky gas, coal and other mining projects for an inner-city MP who's always been under threat from the Greens.
Jeff Chambers is The Australian's chief political correspondent.
As always in politics, there are old scores to settle, and you always want to ensure that your direct rivals, in their case, in the same faction, but from different camps, isn't given a portfolio that might elevate them. And in this case, she was given a portfolio that would really bog down her time because she had to get her head around things and politically would make things difficult for her.
Albanese and Plibersek had been on different sides in the tussle between Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard. They both served as senior ministers, but Albanese was a Rudd loyalist and Plibersek was closer to Gillard. In 2019, Plibersek stood back when Albanese wanted the leadership, allowing him to be elected unopposed. When announcing Plibersek for the environment job, Albanese said tackling the Murray-Darling Basin and protecting the environment needed a strong decision-maker.
Tanya's someone who can get things done.
As soon as she stepped into the job, Plibersek began leading the charge on something called nature-positive reforms. Nature-positive basically means using the tools of the government, like regulation and watchdogs, to try to stop the extinction of species and the destruction of wild places. Plibersek's plan was big, to create a new watchdog called the Environment Protection Authority and new environment standards, benchmarks, to help the EPA decide whether projects could go ahead.
When these laws pass, it will be the first time any government has defined nature positive in legislation. We've defined it, and I quote, as an improvement in the diversity, abundance, resilience and integrity of ecosystems from a baseline.
But the government doesn't control the Senate, so every piece of legislation is a tussle with the Greens and the crossbenchers to get anything done. That left Plibersek's nature-positive laws in a tough situation. The Coalition felt they were dangerous for mining and resources projects, and the Greens felt they didn't go far enough. First, the government threw the new environment standards overboard, and then Plibersek ploughed on with negotiations with the Greens and crossbench, but at the last minute, Albanese decided it was all too hard and dumped the legislation altogether.
There was just too much in what the Greens were demanding in return for their support. From an electoral perspective, it was too dangerous for Anthony Albanese when you're looking at big mining states like Western Australia and Queensland, and the WA Premier himself, Roger Cook, had been very, both publicly and privately, opposed to nature positive, And you can see the timelines there as to when Anthony Albanese stepped in right at the last second with so many other bits of legislation. Probably thought he might get away with it, but he clearly has not. And that now, I guess, shines a light on all interactions that he will have with Tanya Plibersek heading to the election.
Coming up after the break, now Plibersek faces a new battle over the Tasmanian salmon we'd all like to be eating this Christmas. That's after the break. On the west coast of Tasmania is a fjord that looks straight out of a Norwegian fairy tale. There are snow-capped mountains and forested shores, and a thriving salmon farming industry. It's been controversial for a while, with activists saying the giant salmon farms cause pollution and drain oxygen from the water, risking other species like the endangered Maugean skate. That's a fish that looks a bit like a ray with a triangular body and a diet of little crabs, which it hoovers off the seafloor. The Maugean skate only lives in a few places, and Macquarie Harbour is one of them. Plibersek has said there's estimated to be only 40 to 120 adult skates living in the harbour. But the salmon farmers fear this little fish will be used by Plibersek to kill off their jobs.
I was having a chat to the local mayor there, Shane Pitt, today, and they've got real concerns about the future of the local school workers. There's so much uncertainty there, but if they leave the area, then that small little school might have to shut down. There's workers there who are saying, look, we're holding off buying homes. We'd like to buy a home here, but if something happens to the industry, we can't commit to this area. A lot of industry and political people down in Tasmania are telling me that if Anthony Albanese can't get this right, that this could be his Mark Latham moment, as we all know, in 2004 election, the way he handled the forestry issue. John Howard just ruthlessly went in there and swept the seats up there in northern Tassie. Very senior members of the left, including Anthony Albanese himself, Katie Gallagher and others, have been talking directly with the Tasmanian salmon fisheries, and that's not normal. That's usually something that the minister would do if that's their domain, but everyone understands that this next election could be very tight. And for Peter Dutton, he's hoping to win both Braddon and Bass up there in northern Tasmania and also pick up Lions, which would be a massive result for him. I think this has been a known problem for Anthony Albanese for some months now. There's been delegations here in Canberra. As I said, he's visited there a couple of times, and my understanding is he will be back there early in the new year in January. That's what I've heard. And I guess it will come down to how does he get around the legal side of things. They want to be able to announce something which would be legally sound and wouldn't see some ugly federal court fight with environmentalists down in Tasmania.
Jeff Chambers is the Australian's chief political correspondent. First lobsters, now avocados are battling to get into the Chinese market. That's an exclusive from our China correspondent, Will Glasgow. Check it out now at theaustralian.com.au.